Hello and welcome to this next week of our course from Frontiers to Football, where we're looking at sports in South America and social change. And this week we're talking about technology and sport. Now I've come up here to Lockleaze Sports Centre in East Bristol. I think it's a perfect point to talk about the links between technology and sport, and I'll explain to you why in a few reasons. First of all, here we are at a caged football pitch. It's caged so the ball doesn't run away and you don't have to spend too much time walking after it when you've ballooned it over the bar, but it's also caged so that people can't get in without paying. The lines on the pitch, as you can see, are clearly marked so that people don't have to run too far when they're playing football when they're in their mid-40s, but also so that the game itself is limited. And we've seen over the course of our unit so far the many pieces of scholarship that link the growth of organised modern sports to the growth of capitalism. So you can read onto that the enclosing of the sports ground, the sports field, to the enclosure of lands and the eruption of private capital both in the UK and around the world. So those two processes of capitalism and the privatisation of common lands, and also the enclosure of sports fields, from those old folkloric games like Palitun that we looked at, which ranged over the plains and the fields, to sports taking place in controlled, limited ways like this. So there's the technology of the fence, the technology of the line, the goal post, the transition from what we were talking about, jumpers for goal posts, through to commercially fabricated and industrialised goalposts over the course of the 20th century. But then you've also got the different institutional factors which are shaping the growth of sports. So here up in Lockleaze, we're in North Bristol. I just want to explain a few things which we're going to touch on in the rest of the week. So behind me here is Ashley Down Old Boys Sports Club, which Ashley Down is over back towards the university, over that way. Here it is that way. But behind Ashley Down Sports Club in the playing field, you can see the Ministry of Defence buildings looming over the horizon. So you've got the defence industry, defence sector, and then behind the massive pylons which are bringing your electricity to you as we speak, you can see on the crest of the hill into South Gloucestershire over there, you can see the, just over there, you can definitely see it, the Airbus building and Rolls-Royce factories in Filton, which is the birth of Britain's aerospace industry and still hanging on in there to the present day, where the first experiments in human-powered flight took place in Bristol. At the Filton used to be the end of the tram line, and it happened that the owner of the tram company wanted to experiment in new technologies and decided to experiment in flying trams, which became aeroplanes, which is why the air industry is still up there. So you've got the technology of aviation, which, as we'll see in this week, begins as a sport, not as a passenger transport industry. We've got the military dimension, and we've already looked at the role of the military in sports, so we'll touch on that as a technology. And then we've also got the massive social and technological changes of the 20th century, which are electricity. You can see racing out and into the city there. So electricity, which powers floodlights, which powers the transport to get people to and from the sports grounds. And then also behind me up here, you've got the mobile phone mast, which is the modern incarnation of the radio, and the radio which shares the stories of sports, of football matches, of boxing fights, and goes so much to creating this imagined community of the nation, of sports fans, of patriots who are cheering on the footballers wearing their national colours, and so on. So you've got the technology of communication, the technology of power, electricity. You've got the technology of the military and their interest in creating bodies fit for soldiers and stronger citizens that we've seen in previous weeks, and the technology of innovation and engineering as epitomised over there by Airbus and Rolls-Royce. And so all of this still here on the edges of Bristol, and definitely, as we'll see, still there, very clear to see in the history of South American sports, and in the present day of South American sports. So that's a taster of what we'll be looking at this week. I'm now going to get back on my bicycle and go on the wonderful cycle path, which maybe you've seen people cycling up and down in the background, which is called the Concorde Way, because of course over there in Filton is where Concorde was built, the fast plane. And on the other side of the cycle path is the railway line. So another example that we'll touch on this week, the railway and the links of railways to the first football clubs and the ability of people to travel to watch games and to play in games. But now it's starting to rain, so I think it's time to go and do the rest of this week's material inside.